The injuries to his right leg included severely comminuted bicondylar fractures, a severely comminuted tibia plateau fracture, a tibial tubercle fracture, and a tibial shaft fracture. On the day of his collision, he had emergency surgery performed for a 4-compartment fasciotomy and application of a multiplanar spanning external fixator. During his next operation, the external fixator was removed from his right leg. Next, reconstructive hardware was applied over the fractures. The medial cortical segments were placed back into position with locking plates and screws. The posterior fracture was then secured with a synthous posteromedial locking plate. Then the medial joint segment was supported with a 10-hole T-plate and fixed with locking screws. During the third surgery, his lateral tibial plateau fracture was reconstructed with a 14-hole locking plate. His tibial shaft fracture was also set with a 14-hole locking plate. Finally, the tibial tubercle fracture was set with a 5-hole plate with screws. Due to blockage of the popliteral artery, the skin on his foot started blistering and his toes became necrotic. Doctors had no choice but to amputate his lower right leg below the knee. The surgeon began by marking out the amputation site 2 centimeters distal to the lateral hardware. Retractors were then placed behind the tibia, and the bone was cut 1 centimeter above the skin. Next, a fibular resection was made 2 centimeters proximal to the tibial cut. The amputation was then performed using a guillotine blade, and the foot was removed. The perineal vascular bundle was identified, isolated, and cut. Next, the posterior vascular bundle was identified, irrigated, and cut 3 centimeters proximal to the amputation site. After the amputation, additional muscle bulk was removed from the gastrocnemius and soleus. 2 holes were drilled into the tibia, and myodesis was performed to cover the distal fibula and tibula. The muscle reinforced using vicryl sutures. The skin was then closed as much as possible, and vac pads were placed over the open wound.